I don't know why we spend so much energy
in other
trying to
business,
control other people's business. I mean, there's so many more important things in the world than to worry about how it is you like to fuck and how you like to love.
So
what do you want to talk about?
I've been listening to quite a few of your podcasts.
Okay.
And
now, which did you listen to? Did you listen to the old ones?
Or more recent ones.
The more recent ones. Okay,
Yeah.
fine. It doesn't matter. It just tells me more about what you would hear.
So the earliest of your podcasts that I listened to is for wankers.
That was a good one. That was a lot of fun.
It was funny.
Wasn't it hysterical?
Yeah, I was like...
That was because I was in a mood. And so I called my friend and I said, you know what? I mean, I'd had one too many wankers that day. And I said, I'm just getting so tired of... And then I wrote a blog right after that called LinkedIn is Not a Dating App, Boundaries and Etiquette and Boundaries on Social Media. And what's really interesting is I haven't had a badly inappropriate message on LinkedIn since I posted the blog.
Really?
Because I've posted it a bunch of, it rolls a bunch of time. So it's like people actually kind of paid attention and went, oh, maybe I shouldn't be talking to her like that. I just got fed up. I got fed up with getting dick pics on LinkedIn. I got fed up with guys saying things like, like I said on there, the guy who just was like, oh, I want my ass fingered. I'm like, so what are you telling me for? Yeah. Why do I care?
Let's have a conversation first.
Well, the thing is that it's not even let's have a conversation first. It goes beyond that. It's like there has to be a reason that you're talking to me on a social media that's for professional contact, right? It's a peer site for finding jobs or for, making connections and stuff. So if you need help, then, and you're wanting to talk to me about something, then you say, hi, I have some issues that I'd like to deal with. How do I go about seeing you? I mean, that's like appropriate. You don't just kind of blurt stuff out. But most of these guys aren't looking for help. I mean, they want to have sex with me. Like today I got one that said, oh, the person who gets to work with you face to face is the luckiest person. Well, they are, but that's because I'm a good therapist, not because of this.
Yeah.
And he's not referring to because I'm a good therapist. He's like, oh, you're so beautiful. Oh, you're so sexy. It's like, fuck off. That is how I end up feeling, which is why we did W is for Wankers.
It is interesting why people even do that.
I get the phone calls like I was describing on the thing. I get guys call up who want to wank on the phone, and then there was the video guys who I'll never...
How do you know?
How do you know? Because I can see your dick. You're on video. Put it away.
Oh,
and I mean, like we were saying on the show, both me and Zaina are pretty robust people, and so it annoys the fuck out of me, but it doesn't traumatize me or upset me.
True.
But, there are a lot of young women out there that are really traumatized by stuff like that.
Well, that's one of the questions I have in terms of, are people traumatized by that sort of thing? Is because they're not prepared emotionally for it, and is it the fault of the parents that not prepared them?
No, I mean, why should parents have to prepare you to see somebody's genitals that you didn't choose to see their genitals? If somebody flashed in the street, right? If you're walking down the road and you were wearing a trench coat and flashed, you'd go to jail.
Yeah.
It's no different than that. Sending somebody a picture of your genitals that you don't know, a person you've not had a conversation with, sexting is its own thing, right?
Yeah.
That's consensual, mostly. But sending somebody a picture of your genitals when you don't know them is just like flashing on the street. How do you prepare somebody for that? And it depends on, you really can't. I mean, it depends on, it really depends on a person's life experience. If you're somebody who was bullied or experienced trauma growing up, then you're more likely to be traumatized by something like that. If you're somebody who, basically is pretty confident and has had sex and has seen penises, and vulvas, then you might just be like, oh, damn, can I unsee that, please? But, if you've never seen anatomy before, it can be pretty shocking the first time. If it's a stranger, it's context, right? It's the difference between being with a lover and undressing for the first time and, And a lot of women see men for the first time and go, "Oh, it's not very attractive, is it?" Right?
I can imagine.
There are a lot of women who don't think men's penises are anything to look at. Like, they like what they can do, but they don't visually. They don't. Right. I mean, and there are women who do feel they are attractive.
Mm-hmm.
And if I know a person, then I feel it's attractive. If I know a person, I mean, I say to people, even when I'm dating, it's like, don't send me pictures of your anatomy. If I want to see it for the first time in person, if I'm not going to see it in person, I don't want to see a photograph of it.
Yeah, Elisa. What about masturbation? Because I have a question about that.
Now, do you want to turn on recording so that
it's already on?
Oh, good. Okay, I didn't realize that.
Already started.
Great. And I guess you're going to edit for whatever.
A little bit. I'll cut off, but I usually keep it all the way it is.
So, what about masturbation?
So, to phrase it in terms of is it bad or right is a wrong question. The question is, what instances when masturbation is not right? Because, for example, I had a situation kind of in my own life, when I would say addicted to it, and I could do it maybe 5 times a day just because, not for any specific reason, and that caused issues in my relationships with girlfriends.
Okay. So first of all, let's take the word addiction out of it, because it's a misunderstanding of the word addiction. And I highly disagree with when people talk about sex addictions and porn addictions. They're not addictions. When you're addicted to a substance, you've got a physiological addiction. And the science that they talk about in terms of, in terms of porn addiction and sex addiction isn't good science. And if you want a reference for that, look at Dr. David Lay's stuff, and he details pretty clearly the reasons that it's not good science and what the good science is and where you can find it. What you can have is a compulsion, which is different, right? So if you're compulsively masturbating, that means you're not actually choosing it. You're doing it multiple times, and you just feel like a pressure to do it. There are lots of reasons why people have compulsions, but the largest category of reasons are around anxiety. Compulsions are things that you do to try and deal with anxiety. You may not know that. It's not like you go, "Oh, I'm anxious now, I'm going to do a compulsion." But it's it's a habit that gets built up. There's a pressure behind it to try and manage anxiety. So a lot of times when people are masturbating multiple times a day, something's going on in their life that is causing them either fear, anxiety, worry, and this is a self-soothing thing. Right? I mean, kids, when they find their bodies, their initial playing with themselves is self-soothing. It feels good, and so it's comforting. That's how you get like the 2-year-old with the thumb in the mouth and the hand on the penis, or with the hand on the vulva. Oh, they start really young, and like parents freak out, and it's really important that that's perfectly normal. They're exploring their bodies, which is what we do, and when we're little, as we're getting to know ourselves, and they touch themselves and they find it feels good, so they do it again. They're not going for orgasm, right? It's just a nice feeling. And so anything that feels nice becomes comforting. When you're upset, when you're worried, when you're scared, you do something. So like you see a child rock, and often you'll see them playing with themselves. And the way that parents need to deal with this is simply to make sure that they're not doing this in public. But to be careful that they don't shame the child.
Okay, so you just kind of leave them to do it as much as they want to do it,
because they'll stop. I mean, they're not gonna hurt themselves. It's these good things to say are things like, if they're in company and they start doing this, this is something that you do in private because it's your special thing. So if you want to do that, that's okay, but you go to your room.
But if they start doing it at, say, 2 years old, they don't have a cognitive understanding of what's going on.
No, but you're starting to help them with that, right? I mean, because parents freak out when they're 2 years old. Don't do that, Johnny. Oh, that's horrible. That's bad. That's nasty. And now look what you've done, right?
Yeah.
You've shamed the kid. You've probably started some fetishes right there, right? You've impacted their sexuality, and particularly if you do that frequently and intensely, people have sexual problems as a result of that. Shame is one of the things that I end up seeing most in my consulting room. Shame is one of the most difficult things for people to deal with, and it's only human beings who create shame around sex. Dr. Kate Lister, who does whoresofyore.com, I don't know if you're familiar with the website, it's great. She studies and researches sex, the history of sex, sex work, and her book, A Curious History of Sex, just came out. It's fantastic. I got it yesterday, and I'm already a third of the way through. It's fantastic. It's great. She's got a wonderful sense of humor, so she will work with difficult concepts in a way that makes people laugh. And so at the beginning of the book, when she's doing the preface, one of the things that she says is that, all animals have courtship behaviors, but and I hope I get the quote right, but you don't see a wildebeest going into therapy because of a latex fetish. Right? And you don't see, bonobos bugger each other like mad. Male bonobos bugger each other like mad, but they don't get sent to gay conversion therapy camp. Right? It's only human beings that have made all these layers of shame and moralistic things that go on top of sex. So it's not terribly helpful. And it starts very young because parents often don't know how to handle a child touching themselves. Many parents misunderstand and think it's sexual in an adult way. Right? It's not sexual in an adult way. It's age appropriately sexual. We're sexual beings from birth. And so it's age appropriately sexual. Like I said earlier, they're not going for orgasm. They're just feeling good. And so it's kind of complicated sometimes when, if a child's feeling a little bit worried or anxious, so they grab for the two things that make them feel most comfortable, you and themselves. And so then that's one of the, you don't do that while you're hugging me, right? Now, they're not going to understand why, but you have to find a gentle way of saying one or the other.
Setting the boundaries, so to speak.
And so you start setting boundaries in a really gentle way and in a positive, body-affirming way. And that's where you work. That's where you work from.
With regards to fetishes, I'm curious. Is it a thing where it is? So, I don't want to use the word normal, but kind of the standard way of sex is without, perhaps maybe even without anal, it's only kind of vaginal, maybe oral sex, kind of in like very basic.
Yeah, but where? Where is this standard?
I think it's more of
it's people think that's the standard way of sex.
I would say, yeah, exactly, because I think when I first been introduced to sex, which was pretty young, unfortunately, but in terms of nothing forced, it was just my own kind of introduction to it. Hello, internet, and it was started off with just general sex you see in porn, which is obviously not educational, but nevertheless, it's kind of the standard.
Well, it is educational. It's just not good education.
Yeah, right? I would agree with that.
If you've never seen it before, then you're learning something. It's just not, you're not learning the best stuff. Right. It's not very helpful.
And then over time, you kind of get bored of it because you kind of see the same thing. So you start to look into more interesting, something that you haven't seen before. And then you kind of start to discovering the bondage, maybe a group sex. And you kind of evolve into, sometimes you can go into very weird things like, I know from myself, when you start browsing like the porn websites, you go into weird categories, and the next thing you end up in is like a bestiality pornography, and you're looking at it and like, it's kind of interesting in a certain sense. It's not sexual, but it's like interesting, and that's kind of where you end up. And the question is, if you start with a standard, say, sex, and then you evolve into BDSM and kind of group sex, that's what interests you, and then you can't really watch the standard one because it's just boring, and you masturbate while you're watching it. You kind of create that circuit in your brain that this is pleasurable?
Well, no, I don't know about that. I mean, I think that most people have desires and urges and things that they may not be fully formed. And so I think you've got a division now because you've got the internet, and a lot of people, before they're really having sexual desires, are looking at sex, right? But there are, many people who are who enjoy BDSM and enjoy a variety of fetishes, enjoy those not because they got bored with ordinary sex, but because that's what they enjoy, right? That's what turns them on. And they discover that in a variety of ways. Sometimes they discover it because they have an interaction with a human being, that maybe not a sexual one. So for example, with BDSM, and you're looking at a power dynamic, right? So sometimes a young person will have an interaction with somebody who is more powerful than they are, and they'll get a thrill. But it's not a sexual interaction. It's just a interaction like ooh, and then they'll go have a fantasy about it. If they're submissive, they'll have a fantasy about that powerful person doing something to them. And if they're young, it won't have lots of moving parts to the fantasy, right? Right? Because they don't have that all that sophisticated. But it'll be a sexual feeling that goes with the feelings of power and the person being in various positions. And so that's all coming from them, not from something they're seeing in the outside world. Okay, so this is a great example, right? I mean, I know it's a dog, but it's a great example. This is what she wants. She wants this because it feels good. She wants this because it feels good. So you think what I was saying about a kid before. They're curled up against you and they're cuddling into you because it feels good. They're touching themselves because it feels good. Because this is oral. This is very oral. Just like kid have a finger in his mouth, again, because it feels good. There's sensualness to it. So that's age-appropriate sexuality, that part. So most people, I think, don't discover pornography and stay interested in it before they have some form of sexual feeling. I know there's a portion of people who get bored with ordinary and they move on to other things, and then they discover other things they like, but I don't think they're conditioning themselves. I mean, you think you would, I'm sure some people can, right? But if you're masturbating and something doesn't turn you on, you don't continue to watch it.
True.
Right? If you're masturbating and you see something, say, for example, something that disgusts you, you're not going to condition yourself to feel okay about that. You're going to go, ugh. You might even lose your erection or, or your interest if you're a vulva owner. And then you're going to move away from it, right? And so the idea that you're conditioned by seeing these things to suddenly find them sexual when you have absolutely no desire, not unless somebody's making you masturbate, like they're making you watch it, making
so weird.
Yeah, it would be. But so something clicks in.
But where does that desire come from? So, for example, I've had a girl once who asked me to slap her during sex, and it's not like a gentle slap, like
no, she
all the way go.
It's masochistic.
Very scary for my part because I never hit a woman in my life, and it's like,
no, it wasn't your thing.
Yeah, but it's like I'll do it because you clearly want it. But where does that come from?
We don't know, right? We don't know. And sometimes desires come from experiences people have that were paired when they were young. The classic experience is the kid who was going through his mom's underwear drawer and became aroused. And it was incidental. It wasn't necessarily because of the underwear, but the underwear was silky. And they became aroused. And they associated in their mind the arousal with the underwear, the silky underwear. So they put on the underwear, and they made that pairing because they made an association between the two, and they made a pairing, and they ended up having a fetish for wearing women's underwear. That's a classic one that people point to. But most of the time we can't find something like that. Most of the time we can't say this happened and that caused this We just don't know. Some people have inborn tendencies, the same as we have inborn tendencies for other types of sexuality. And these days, there's a lot of theory and research on sexuality not being simply from homosexual to heterosexual, but now including other axes like from monogamy to non-monogamy, and from dominance to submission, and from asexuality to hypersexuality, and that actually our orientation has bits and pieces from all of that, or sometimes gender is completely irrelevant. So for me, in my orientation, gender is completely irrelevant. I like power. So I'm submissive. I like dominance. Now, I've always liked that. As long as I can remember, that was a turn on. Like, even in my earliest sexual experiences, even when I wasn't really having sex, when I wasn't yet having sex, that the thoughts, that would, you would tingle, and that was a turn on for me. So gender then really doesn't matter, because I can find that kind of power and connection in someone of any gender. And now I, years ago, would have defined myself as bisexual because they didn't give me the option to define myself without my orientation without gender. Now that I have the option, I often will not use bisexual, although because bi people get erased, I will sometimes still use it.
Okay, well, what would you use?
Well, I tend to, if I have time to explain, I'll say my orientation is slave. That's what turns me on. Power turns me on. Okay. And so that's my sexual orientation. That's what's necessary for me. I don't have sex with somebody where there isn't a power imbalance, a consensual power imbalance. I don't have egalitarian sex anymore.
Egalitarian sex.
Yeah, it does nothing. Well, it does nothing. It does nothing for me. So that's how I would describe it. But most of the time, I just say I'm queer because it's easier. Because and then somebody can ask you, well, what do you mean by queer? And then you can explain.
I was just about.
Well, that's why I use it, because I don't like to use bisexual because it's binary.
Yeah. But
male and female.
You would consider
right.
But there's that's another thing about the gender side of things, because
my gender is static. I'm not gender fluid, right? I'm female. That's how I identify. That's how I've always identified. For me, that's what works. Yeah. So my gender is that I'm female, and I'm biological female as well. And so that's gender for me. And for me, gender is terribly normative and uncomplicated, right? It's normative because I'm born with a female body, and I experience my gender as female. I identify as female. So there it is.
Okay.
But for my sexuality, for my orientation, my sexuality is about what attracts me, right? Who attracts me? What is it about people that attracts me? So for that, gender is irrelevant, because it can be because men, trans men, gender fluid, trans women, all of these people, if they have the right combination of power and the right energy, I'll be attracted regardless of what genitals they have.
Makes
or
sense.
What gender they identify as.
All right, fair enough. So it's just about the power.
It's about the power and the energy of the person. So that's what works for me.
And how did you get into kind of BDSM and kind of submissive?
Well, I like I said, I've always been that way. So I started looking for ways to enact the things that made me hot when I started having sex. It's like most of us do, right? And so, I had a boyfriend, and I would ask to put his hand on the back of my neck when I was giving him oral sex, to hold me down. I would create situations to give me the feeling that I wanted. I didn't know that was BDSM, right? At that point, I had no labels for it. What I knew was, I like it rough. I like it when somebody's in charge and I'm not in charge. That's what I like. So I would tell somebody that, let's play a game. Let's play pirates. I remember with a cousin, and this is before I was having sex. I remember with a cousin, we were the elder two. We weren't related, but we were the elder two. And family friends. We used to call them cousins.
Okay.
So it was us, he and I were the two eldest, and then there were two boys in the middle, my brother and his brother, and then the youngest was his sister and my youngest brother, right? So we used to, when they came over, once we got to be about 11, around there. When they came over, we would play pirates, right? And we'd send them off to go search for things, and he would tie me up in the closet and we would kiss, right? So, it was like we playing pirates always worked really well.
How old were you?
11.
11. So that interest for power imbalance, it came...
Oh, it's from the very beginning.
From the very beginning.
And I don't know why, right? There's no some big incident that caused this. It's just how I've always felt. It's just what always turned me on.
Interesting.
Yeah, and there are a lot of people that I know who are who primarily their sexual expression is some part of BDSM with the same thing. A lot of people who are masochistic and a lot of people who are sadistic knew very early that pain was something that they found that turned them on, or right. So it's just like. A lot of people who identify as homosexual knew very early the person they were attracted to was that person. Where did it come from? Well, we know it doesn't come from a trauma, right? Where did it come from? And there are probably isolated cases for all of these things that come as a result of some trauma or some pairing, you're masturbating and something happens. You're masturbating and you're lying on a leather coat, right? And the smell of the leather smells
coincidental.
Good. Yeah, it's coincidental. Well, and some fetishes are coincidental. But that's not, that's not the reason. Like when people sometimes people come into therapy or coaching and they want to go back and find the reason. Pointless. 9 times out of 10, we won't find the reason. Much better to become comfortable with yourself than to worry about what caused it.
But then if there's something that caused it, how do I phrase it? So if there's some instance or a chain of events that led you to kind of wanting things that you do, would you then not consider this to be a sort of abnormality?
Why? I mean, because even within the normal spectrum, and I hate the word, but even within the usual spectrum, some people like oral sex in a certain way. Some people like, I'm not swearing, and I usually swear. So if it's okay to swear, I might.
Please.
Right? Okay, so some people like to fuck in a certain way, right?
Yeah.
They like missionary, or they like doggy style. There might be a chain of events that leads them to prefer fucking while they're upside down, right? Is that abnormal? I mean, are we going to say that's an abnormality and we need to get rid of it? Why put the energy towards that? If you're not hurting anybody unconsensually, right? Actually, I tend not to use hurt. If you're not harming anybody, right?
Makes sense, yeah.
Right. If you're not harming anybody, and you're not harming yourself, and you're not engaging in sexual activity with a being that cannot consent, right? So bestiality is not okay because animals can't consent to sex with humans. So it's not okay. It's non-consensual. It's actually illegal most places as well.
But I know this is going to be a weird conversation now, but with animals, I've had a gentleman on the podcast, Scott Kapoor, and he was talking about there's a book which kind of talks about there's like a farm somewhere in America where you can go and fuck animals, basically. And
I'm sure there is.
The question is, I don't know what the question is. Yeah, we can put that to one side for the time being.
So I mean, that's an extreme example, but it's an important one. So, right, if you're going to have sex with somebody who is under the age of consent, it's not okay. Why? Because they're not able to consent. They're not old enough to make an informed decision. If you're going to have sex with somebody who is so drunk that they're comatose, that's not okay because they cannot consent. So it's those sorts of things. unless you're enacting things that are harming others or harming yourself, who cares where it came from? It's what you like. Instead of spending the energy on, oh my God, how did I become this odd person? Since most people at this point engage in some form of non-normative sexual behavior. So much so that spanking's almost normative now, right? Because it's such a common thing for people to try. So instead of spending your time trying to figure out where something came from and your energy, why not spend the time trying to get comfortable with whatever it is you like?
But then you would develop yourself in that way, in a certain sense. So I'm judging from my own experience, for example, because I like to experiment and try new things, and however odd they may be to start with. And I'm always I just get bored with doing that particular thing, and I want to find new ways. So I spend like £200 on summers or something to just find that new interesting thing and try it on, for example, my girlfriend or whoever I happen to be with at that time. And I just constantly push the boundary a little bit further, because once I've done one thing, that's it. I've been there, done that. It's fun. We can do it again at some point, but can we do something else next time?
And some people, but that's a different kind of a thing, right? Some people have that. They have a low boredom threshold, and so they do find it hard to do anything that, they get bored very easily. So then they keep trying new things because nothing is maintaining its turn on. They're looking for whatever edge. I mean, for some people that's an edge. It's an adrenaline thing. Like for people who are into more extreme forms of BDSM and more extreme activities, it's an adrenaline thing. They're tracing the adrenaline, right? And for other people, they're just simply, they've got a low boredom threshold.
It's just what it is.
And I mean, and the only time you really need to spend energy looking at that is that if it's causing you problems in your relationships. And if you're constantly dissatisfied, well then, yeah, something's going on there psychologically. But the sex is probably only a symptom, right? That's probably not the main thing. That's probably a symptom of whatever's going on psychologically underneath.
Then wouldn't you be able to apply the same situation to generally fetishes, that there's some psychological thing that's going on that drives that?
Not necessarily. I mean, for sometimes it's simply a pairing. Other times there's a psychological thing going on that drives it. And I mean, and we need to be really clear about what the definition of fetish is, right?
Yeah.
Because we throw the term around, and so lots of times people don't know. A fetish is actually when somebody cannot achieve satisfaction, achieve orgasm without the thing, object, activity present. A true fetish. That's like as it is in diagnosis in the DSM. A true fetish, you need that present in order to achieve or maintain arousal and achieve or maintain satisfaction. So, if you're getting bored and moving from one thing to another, you don't have a true fetish, right? You're just trying things out, and they're interesting for a while, and then they're not so interesting. But for somebody who actually has a fetish, like people who have foot fetish, for example, like they need feet as part of the sexual act, or they don't get off. So it's not just I like feet. If it's a true fetish, this is necessary to get off.
All right. So the power imbalance for you, that's a fetish.
No. I mean, because it's broader. It's fetishes tend to be. I mean, I suppose you could define it that way, but fetishes tend to be more specific objects and acts, and right. It's a broader category because you can fulfill that in 100 different ways. Like you can have power expressed in so many different ways that leaves space, much more space than for somebody who's got a simple, straightforward fetish.
All right.
It's more complicated. But yes, I mean, for me to get off. Yeah, I mean, I can still get off. I mean, I don't have egalitarian sex. It's not my thing. I can still get off without a power imbalance.
She's not as interesting, basically.
I don't choose. Yeah, no, not interesting at all. Yeah, it is. For me, it's not. It doesn't. I mean, I'll get off. I just won't get off to the level that I truly enjoy. So, you know, I mean, I could have somebody could perform oral sex on me. Mm-hmm. There'd be no power imbalance at all, and I would, if they're good, I would certainly come.
So you wouldn't necessarily in that kind of situation then. What would oral sex? Would it be pleasurable to you only when there is a power?
No, it would be pleasurable to me anyway, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But it would be more. It's more pleasurable to me, and I would pursue it within some form of power play, some form of power and authority play, because that's what interests me. But I mean, I could still get off on oral sex even where there wasn't. So that's why I'm saying it's not like although it's my orientation, so it's how I choose to express myself sexually. I'm not hampered by that in the sense that I can achieve orgasm in other circumstances. I just probably wouldn't put myself in the position.
Fair enough. A question then. I had a relationship once, and it started off as sex was great in terms of the lady comes every time during the standard kind of sex sort of thing. But then once obviously I got bored and started to introduce like plays with the clitoris, yeah, that's what it's called. She obviously enjoyed that more, and slowly but surely over a period of time, she stopped enjoying the standard sex, as it says, and started to pursue more of that action in that area to make herself come. Is that, again, conditioning?
No. Look, when she's getting off on penetration, she's still having clitoral sex. The clitoris, the smallest part of the clitoris is on the outside of the body.
Okay.
And then the rest of the clitoris, the horns of the clitoris, are in the inside of the vagina. And that is actually probably what is pushing the orgasm when you have vaginal penetration, because you're hitting those. So the organ is much bigger. The organ is much bigger. I wish I'd brought my model. The organ is much... No, I've got a little 3D model.
I'm not laughing because I think I would really like to see it, because
I hadn't thought about
biology in my life.
Actually, if you go to Shush Women's Erotic Emporium, they sell a 3D model of a clitoris. It's cheap. It's because it's not expensive, because it's what's the word? 3D printer, right? And they're really cool. And every guy and every gal and every non-binary and every gender should look at this and understand the anatomy. The clitoris, the part on the outside is the smallest bit of the clitoris.
What's happening every day?
So vaginal penetration and things like G-spots, we're not sure whether it's just part of the vaginal wall or whether that's actually hitting another branch. You know, so they're just variations on a theme. Yes, direct stimulation works really well for some women and not for others. Indirect stimulation, but still works better than penetration for some women and not for others. And it's only about 28 to 35% of women reach orgasm from penetration. Most women need some direct stimulation on the part of the clitoris that's on the outside of the body.
Why is that the case?
Because that's where most of the nerve endings are.
I
mean, it's like, there's 8,000 nerve endings in that area.
Interesting.
And the clitoris's sole function is for pleasure. It has no other function. Like, unlike the penis, right? Which is also the procreative organ, which also has the urethra in it, right? So you've got all those things. Yeah. Women have a bladder and a urethra, the bladder, and then the urethra comes from the bladder. The urethra is separate. The vagina is separate, and that's, although you've got the horns on the inside, right? But the vagina is separate. That's the root of procreation. The clitoris is purely for pleasure. It has no other function.
Interesting. Can you die from having too many orgasms in a row?
Not that I've ever heard.
So,
I mean, I suppose that if one's heart weren't healthy, one could have a heart attack.
quite way to die.
But one could have a one could have a heart attack from having one orgasm if your heart wasn't healthy. We don't know. But no, I don't think it's possible to die because of the orgasm itself, per se. I mean, it would be the stress on the circulatory system or something like that.
I had a girlfriend. It's going to be interesting conversation there again. And again, pushing the boundaries. And she likes, perhaps the same way as you do, is a certain dominance difference in your relationship. And in bedroom only, though, that is. With regards to when we're having sex, I like to push it, I can do my thing, finish, and then I kind of find pleasure in her. So we have like a range of equipment, put it this way, that we use. And sometimes I go until we have a safe word, and she is like, can't handle it anymore, and she's afraid that she would like to go further, but she's afraid that she can't physically handle it anymore. And I said, well, you can just go a little bit further, because I think you can do it. But she's very afraid because for two reasons. One was quite a few orgasms in a row happens, and she's just, every time she's scared, she says, oh, I'm going to die. And then she comes and it's great, and then it repeats. And then also there's a question of a lot of water comes out with squirting.
She squirts.
Yes.
That's not water. That's actual. It's actual. I'm blocking on the name, but it's a particular type of fluid. It's female ejaculate.
How much of it is safe to dispose of, so to speak? So, like, how much can come out?
Tons. I mean, there's nothing unsafe about it.
Okay,
I mean,
so nothing to worry about.
Some women, squirt volumes, and some women barely squirt, and some don't squirt at all. It can be exhausting. I mean, a lot of women talk about, and this isn't universally true, but a lot of women talk about when they have experiences where they actually squirt, they kind of, unlike when they don't squirt, where they might go orgasm to orgasm to orgasm to orgasm and not feel like tired and wanting to go to sleep, that when they actually squirt, it's kind of like when men ejaculate and they want to turn over and go to sleep, sort of that. So there are a lot of women who describe that, but not it's certainly not universal.
Okay. So it's safe to go as far as it goes.
Yeah.
Really. There's no
yeah. Well, just make sure you replenish your fluids, right?
Very true. Yeah.
You might need to drink some Gatorade to replenish your electrolytes, right? But yeah, she's not going to die from having too many orgasms. Although one of the terms for orgasm is the little death.
Oh.
So it's not a new fear, right? It's that somebody could feel like they're going to, that it's so intense that they're going to die. Mm-hmm. But she's not going to die from too many orgasms. And I mean, sometimes women get incredibly sensitive after one orgasm or many, and then they don't want to be touched because they're so sensitive. And it might be that they have more orgasms in them, but to get there, they're going to have to go through that hypersensitivity, and they don't necessarily want to do that. So. Mm-hmm.
With regards to, I had a question there as well. On, sensitivity. So if you kind of relatively often push that boundary of, how many orgasms you get in a row, aren't you kind of forcing that, just one orgasm is just not enough anymore because you've experienced so many in a row that is just...
It depends.
Completely different levels.
I mean, it depends on the person, sometimes and orgasms can be of different intensity and flavor as well. You might have 6 little orgasms in a row. It might be very different from one big orgasm. Like, not all orgasms feel the same.
Little orgasms?
Yeah, like small orgasms. Women have 4 sets.
Sorry.
Well, there's 4 large branch pairs of nerves coming into the area, right? And so orgasms can be different combinations of branches, right? So if all 4 of the branches are being used. The orgasm comes from stimulation of all of that. The intensity may be much higher than if you're only stimulating one branch,
okay.
right? So, not all orgasms feel the same. So you can have a little orgasm that builds, and one runs into the other, runs into the other, runs into the other, and then eventually a large climax, or maybe not eventually a large climax. Maybe then, you're just done. Or you can have one all-consuming orgasm. For example, if you're edging, which is when edging is when you push someone as close to orgasm as possible without allowing the orgasm. So you try and keep this edging because you're keeping them on the edge of orgasm. If you're edging, and you can do this, men and women, and anybody can do this, right? When you're edging, you can do that long enough, and when you finally do have an orgasm, it can be a huge explosion. So, it depends.
Interesting. With regards to going to polygamy side of things, how does that work? Because not from a kind of perspective of defend yourself, more of a question of how does that work in terms of, if you and your partner, whoever it may be, you just feel like you just want somebody else in just for the sex part of things, or maybe even relationship-wise, to have like a free-way relationship. How is that?
Okay, so it depends. Just give me 2 seconds. Sure. I'm going to grab the coffee-like thing that I have with me. Consensual non-monogamy. So, polygamy, by the way, is marriage. So it's when somebody's polygamous, they're one man, more women, right? When somebody's polyamorous, there's no gender attached to it.
Okay, good to know. She finds the way.
Yeah, yeah, she does. I can hear her. She's loud.
You should hear her snores. It's
just really funny. She's like, "Oh, you're going to put me out here? I'm still going to be the center of attention."
Never drinks that much, ever.
I know, it's just very funny. She's like, yeah, she's annoyed. She knows. She's not stupid. So, again, this is like a very wide variety of what people do. Consensual non-monogamy can run the gamut from being monogamous, which is a term that Dan Savage coined, which basically is mostly monogamous, but like an occasional exception might be made for something like, you might decide that, yes, you can go kiss that person over there. Or yes, when you're out at this conference, you can go have sex, but only the once. So most of the time you're monogamous. And it can run the gamut from something like that to an open marriage where it's just sex that happens outside, and maybe threesomes together, or foursomes with another couple, or, when you're away, both of us can do what we're going to do, but we're not going to talk about it. So that's just sexual and there's no other relationship. Or swinging, where you might go to a club and play together or swap with people. And you might have friendships with these people. You might not, but you might. So, there's a different set of rules in an environment for swinging than there would be if, for example, in a full polyamorous relationship. You might have a different set of rules. And each person has their own set of rules around each relationship, has its own set of rules. You have to work out, how do you want to do this? For polyamory, typically when we use that word, we're talking about relationships in addition to sex. So we're talking about, that doesn't necessarily mean living together or in proximity, but we're talking about ongoing relationships beyond the relationship that the couple. And sometimes you have things like solo polyamory, which is when, for example, somebody doesn't live with anybody, doesn't choose to marry anybody. They look on their first relationship as the relationship they have with themselves. And then they have partners here, there, and everywhere, right? Outside of that.
Isn't that just being single?
Well, in the old days, I would have said it's just being single, but I think this is when it's more of a long-term thing, right? The difference is doing it more long-term, right? Like, and people who are single don't necessarily make commitments to other people. Like being single is being single.
Yeah.
But if you're doing solo polyamory, you might have a relationship with your partner. You just live in separate places, but you might have a relationship where you see each other twice a week for the rest of your lives. Would you call that being single? No, because you're in a relationship.
Yeah, I can argue
right.
that.
So it's not single. Single, you're not in a relationship. You might just be dating. That means you're sort of seeing some people, but you haven't made any commitments. Whereas in solo polyamory, people make commitments. They're just not choosing to do the traditional, we go from spending 1 day a week to 2 days a week to 5 days a week to living with each other to marriage and everything like that.
Why not?
Because they don't want to.
Is it healthy not to?
Why not?
I don't know,
Different things for different people.
Well, that's another thing. It kind of goes into the question of like an absolute truth. Sort of, is there an absolute right way of doing things?
No, there's absolutely not. That's the absolute truth. There is no right way of doing things. There never has been. People have some weird idea that, when they go on, humans are monogamous. Humans haven't been monogamous for very long. And there are still many cultures where they're not monogamous. They're decidedly not monogamous.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you look, for example, at the immigration laws in the United Kingdom, if you come from an Arab country, a Muslim country, you are allowed to bring your 3 wives with you. And it's not bigamy, because your culture, the culture you're coming from, that's the norm. You can have more than 1 wife. Not everybody does, but that's part of the culture. There are some countries in Africa where women have more than 1 husband. It's called polyandry, as opposed to polygamy. I got that right. So, monogamy, it's not like we've always been monogamous creatures. There is nothing natural about monogamy. Monogamy was something that was primarily developed in order to deal with the issues of paternity.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If your wife, you have to think about this at the time where we don't have birth control.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have birth control. We have property and we have inheritance, and these are important things to us, the species. If you're not monogamous, how do you know that child is yours? We don't have DNA testing either.
Makes sense.
That's where monogamy comes from. It's a business transaction that got written into all this religious stuff. I mean, if you look back at the Old Testament, they are not monogamous. It does not say 1 man and 1 woman anywhere in the Old Testament.
Seriously?
No, they had the option to have more than 1. The same as, that's the thing. They all come from the same thing, right? Muslim and Christian and Jewish. We start with Jewish in the Old Testament. You had the option to have more than 1 wife. I know. I mean, you didn't have the option to have more than 1 husband, however. But that had to do with misogyny.
Yeah.
But do you understand what I'm saying? So this is a construct that people sort of say, God said, da da da. No, this is a construct. And there were reasons, social reasons for the construct. Now, having said that, are some people naturally more monogamous than others? Probably. Probably. I would venture to say that there are some people who can't split their attention easily.
Could it be their insecurity?
Well, yes, that's another reason. But that wouldn't be naturally more monogamous. So that would be they're being monogamous because of insecurity. But for example, some people find it difficult to split their attention and to keep balance with 2 competing projects.
Mm-hmm.
They may be more naturally monogamous because they find it really hard to keep that balance. So they prefer to have a one-point focused attention. That works for them. Mm-hmm. Other people are probably naturally more non-monogamous. I'm certainly naturally more non-monogamous. Mm-hmm. I did have a monogamous marriage, and I kept my vows. Mm-hmm. But I found that very difficult. And in particular, in that marriage, I was not getting my needs met, so I had no options. Yeah. And I found that incredibly difficult. And so, I mean, for me, when I really like somebody, when I really love somebody, when I really find them wonderful, I probably also want to sleep with them. Because that's just a natural outgrowth for me. Not everybody's like that. But for me, it's a natural outgrowth. If I like, because it's not about physical attraction. It comes from the connection. Mm-hmm. And the person becomes physically attractive even if I didn't find them that way to begin with. Right? Because it's all about the connection. So if I'm really into somebody, mm-hmm. I want to sleep with them. And that's non-monogamous, right? Mm-hmm. That's, so do I sleep with everybody I feel that way about? Absolutely not. There are plenty of circumstances in which I wouldn't do that for a variety of reasons, either because there's a friendship that I don't want to confuse, or because someone has a partner that might not be comfortable with it, or because my partner isn't comfortable with it, or because it's just like I have too much on my plate and it's just too complicated, or I work with somebody. So just because you have the urge doesn't mean you act. But part of me living a consensually, ethically non-monogamous life is that I have the freedom to act within the parameters of my relationship with my husband, which is an authority transfer relationship. So we're a bit different because I need to have permission from him.
But doesn't he also, you can veto?
I can veto, yeah. I can veto him as well. But we agreed that. Mm-hmm. And we agreed that for a variety of reasons. Because I am better at spotting people who are...
Experience.
Yeah. I'm better at spotting people who might be wanting to cause drama or who really are not too terribly stable. And he'll be like, ooh, shiny. I'm like, yeah, not that shiny. Right? Go have the shiny one over there, where I know I don't have to worry about it. So I have the opportunity to veto. And I actually don't have to give a reason. I can just say, nah, I don't like that person. The way we have things set up, it's very easy. If you're interested in him, he says, and he's clear on every profile, everywhere he has, if you're interested in me, you need to talk to her. So if people don't even make the effort to talk to me, it's simple. We don't go any further, it's it. If somebody's interested in me, I check to see if there's a connection, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's pointless having him vet somebody when you meet the person and it's like, right? And if there's a connection, then he talks to the person. Sometimes he insists on meeting them, and then he makes a decision. Mm-hmm. I don't have the agency in this relationship. He does. I've given him my authority, which means that, so it's a little bit different than most polyamorous relationships, where everybody has agency to make decisions for themselves. Mm-hmm. I don't. And in theory, he could end a relationship because that's what he wanted to do. In practice, the only time he's ever threatened to end a relationship I was in was because it was a really bad relationship and I was very unhappy. And he said, this is just not working for you. And so you either deal with it and end it or I will. And so I went and dealt with it. I pulled up my big girl panties and went and dealt with it myself, right? But in theory, he could say, nope, for no reason. Just like, I don't feel like, can't have that anymore.
But so can you. So basically...
No, I don't have the same freedom. I can say no. I can say no, but it's different. My veto is about somebody's not going to be a good fit. It's not about anything to do with a relationship he's already in, right? Like if he were in a relationship, he's in a relationship with somebody, I don't have the option to go, I don't think this relationship is good for you. It's over. Like I don't have that level of control.
Okay.
From my position, if I noticed something like that, I could bring up, listen, I've observed some things I'm not tremendously comfortable with, but he's still the one who gets to make the decision.
Okay.
Whereas, because he's the one in charge. So I can make suggestions and I can make comments, but he makes the decision.
So if you bring up a suggestion and then he shuts it down and says no,
that's how it is.
Does that turn you on more with him? Because it's kind of display of power. No?
Yeah, no, but that's kind of a...
It's a different thing.
It might turn me on depending on what the suggestion was, right? But in day-to-day life, does it turn me on more? No, it just reinforces our dynamic.
Okay.
Right. I mean, one of the things about living in a dynamic like this, just more than in the bedroom, is that lots of things get eroticized that otherwise wouldn't. And so that's a lot of fun.
Ooh, that is
because somebody is requiring you to do something. I hear the snoring.
Exactly.
Wow, worse than some people I know. Because he's requiring me to do something, and he might require me to do it in a certain way, and because of the erotic connection between him giving an order or him, giving a direction to me, the activity itself ends up eroticized, and so that's kind of fun because it makes household things and other things a lot more fun than they otherwise would be. But not everything is eroticized. Some stuff you still have to do that you don't want to do, right? Period. There it is. It's part of life. You have to be grown. So we do poly a bit differently than other people because of our dynamic. And what that means in our situation is some people don't want to get involved with me because they don't want him involved. Right? It's like, they don't want to get involved with me because they don't want to talk to him. They don't want to know him. They want a separate relationship. Some people like their relationships separate. Other people like everybody to meet everybody. And that doesn't necessarily have to do with authority transfer or power exchange or BDSM. It might just have to do with the way you do poly. But in our case, it's not a case-by-case basis. You can't play with me if you don't talk to him, period. End of. And so some people don't want that. They're like, well, I'm not submitting to him. Why should I have to talk to him?
Is it a submission? No,
it's not a submission, but some people feel it is.
Okay,
right? Right? I don't want a relationship with him. I want a relationship with you. So I shouldn't have to deal with that. Which to me is kind of interesting because even if we weren't in a power dynamic, we are a married couple. And so courtesy, from my perspective as a human, is if I'm going to play with somebody's marital partner, that I at least speak with that person and that I'm pleasant and polite and make sure that everything's okay. It's about respect, that relationship was there before I was, for me. So that isn't even about power exchange. That's just simple manners. However, some people really object to it, and so, then we don't get involved. It's very simple. It's a really easy way to weed people out.
It seems
right? Like when somebody approaches me, and I like them enough to want to actually meet them, and I feel there's a connection, even before I meet them, though, right? If I'm not even sure if I like them, but I will always say to somebody, if they approach me, it's like, okay, so this is how this goes in my relationships. This is how I do my relationships. So, I don't like to spend a lot of time talking online. I hate it. I want to spend time doing things, not talking about doing things.
I agree.
A lot of people want to spend time talking about sex. I don't want to spend time talking about sex unless I'm in front of you and we're talking dirty. Then, okay, I'll talk about sex, right? Or I'll talk about it to make sure that you like the things I like and I like the things you like, right?
Makes sense, yeah.
But I don't want to spend months online talking about sex. No, I want to go do sex, right? That requires you actually being physically present. Well, not always, but you know what I mean.
Sometimes.
Most of the time, it's more pleasurable for you to actually be in the room, So I'll say to somebody, yeah, I do. Yeah, it looks like we do have stuff in common. Yes, I am interested in maybe taking this further. So this is how I do things. I'm in this type of relationship. My profiles say that anyway, but I'm in this type of relationships. This is what this means. This means that we meet, and if we have a connection, when we go and have our coffee and we're, hot for each other, then you need to call him.
How does that conversation go?
With him?
Yes.
Depends on the person.
So it's like...
So there's been two conversations that he's had over the last 6 months, right? 2 people have approached.
Busy.
So one of the people that approached, they spent an hour and a half on the phone, right? They got along really well, and they're really looking forward to meeting each other. So,
awesome.
That was great. I mean, he came off the phone and he said, "Can we keep her?" Right? So that was great. That went really well.
Okay.
The other one was with a man, and it also went well. Not an hour and a half on the phone, but they had a lovely conversation. And he said, "Yeah, I like him. It's okay. Go ahead, have fun."
So, do you know how the conversation goes? So, for example, if this was a situation, they were kind of like, "Hello, planning to have sex with your wife?"
No, I mean, first of all, okay. So to be clear, I would like to have sex with your wife, please. Not planning to have sex with your wife.
Okay.
This is permission, right?
Okay.
Without his yes, you ain't having nothing with me.
Okay.
But that's not even the thing. Okay, so for me, because I like energy play, because I'm into a connection with people. I don't do a lot of pickup play. I don't do a lot of hooking up.
Okay.
Right? Where I don't really know anybody. I don't really know the person, and we're just going to go have sex, and that's it. And so you would rarely get somebody calling him and saying, I want to hook up with your wife, because he would say no.
Okay.
Because it's too complicated for us, and it's unsatisfying. It's unsatisfying to have sex on a one night stand for us.
Okay.
It doesn't work. Now, when I was younger, it was different. That was a different place in life and different energy and different depth that I was willing to go to. Now it's, I'm looking for different things. In some circumstances, like we have an extended family of friends, and there are people that there are regular playmates within that group, and I have a relationship with 2 people within that group, and so he knows them fairly well, and so those conversations were totally different, right? Because he'd gotten to know them and developed a relationship with them before the idea of a sexual relationship with me arose.
Okay.
And by the time the attraction was finally too intense to deny, their conversation was probably very different than conversations with a stranger.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's a stranger, like, by the time he talked to this man that I'm sort of dating, kind of quiet at the moment, but I'm sort of dating. By the time he talked to him, he had seen the guy's profile. He'd seen the conversations that we'd had. Now, I don't always do that. He can't be bothered to read everything I say. He trusts me, so I can give him a synopsis of what's going on. Mm-hmm. He'd seen his profile. He'd looked at, looked for things like consistency in the way that they communicated. We'd met. We'd had a first date. Mm-hmm. And the first date had gone incredibly well. And so I'd come home and said, "Yeah, I had a great time, blah, 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 blah." Mm-hmm. And so he got the phone call, and it was like, "Hi," and introduced myself, and he probably asked him what his intentions were. Mm-hmm. What are your intentions with my wife? What is it you're looking for?
Mm-hmm. So like an interview.
Yeah, most definitely. What are you looking for? If he gets an uncomfortable feeling, he might ask detailed questions about someone's past. Mm-hmm. If he's comfortable, he probably won't. Mm-hmm. If the opportunity is there easily for him to meet somebody, he'll prefer to meet them.
Yeah, face to face is better.
Yeah. So, it really depends on what somebody's bringing to the table. And sometimes people are stupid, right? Even though I've said very clearly, this is not just, if all you're looking for is somebody to fuck, I'm not your person. Mm-hmm. Because the only people I do that with, I already know. Yeah, right. I've got
Makes
fuck
sense,
buddies.
Yeah.
I don't have a particular need for fuck buddies because I have them. I'm looking for particular things in a relationship, and because of what I'm looking for, it requires quite a deep relationship. It's intimate. It's emotionally intimate. And so, if somebody comes across really shallow when talking with him, then he's going to reject that. He's going to be like, "Yeah, no, thanks."
And what is it that you're looking for, if you don't mind?
I'm looking for somebody. I've got some areas of sexual desires that he's just not into. So I'm looking for somebody who is into the stuff that area of stuff that I'm into.
Can I ask what it is?
Objectification and some humiliation play and objectifications when you see somebody as a sex object, right? And also sometimes people take it further. Somebody's furniture,
stuff
like that.
It's very interesting.
Could be quite cool. But this isn't always the case. But when you are very deeply in love with somebody, it can be quite hard to kind of humiliate them, right?
Yeah, I can imagine.
Right. It can be quite hard to step back from your feelings. Even you can be actually very powerful and you can be very sadistic. But humiliation is a different sort of thing. Some people don't have a problem with it, but others do. And he's not into it. It's just not his thing. And that's fine. So I'm looking for a relationship that will incorporate that and other things, but that will incorporate those. Mm-hmm. But I'm looking for a relationship because you don't do that as pickup play because it's emotionally sensitive stuff. You don't, well, some people might. I don't. Mm-hmm. So that's a relationship. So that's, I have other things. I have other relationships. And so it might sound weird, like to say, well, I'm only looking for a particular type of relationship, but it's just that I have other relationships and I only have so much time and energy. And that's what limits the amount of relationships that people have most of the time, right? Is that you only have so much time and energy. I tell people to think about having children, right? Most people don't have any trouble loving more than one child, right? Really? If you have 6 children, you love 6 children, right? You don't go, oh, I better not have another child because I don't think I can love another child. Nobody ever says that. What are they worried about? Time, resources, money, right? Time, money, energy. They choose not to have another child because they don't have enough of those things. They don't have enough emotional stuff to give. Yeah. And it's the same with polyamory for me. There's only so much time and energy that I've got. And so if I meet 5 people who are still not into these things, but are into all the other things I'm into, I'm going to say no to all 5 of them because I already have relationships that do that and I just don't have enough.
So it seems to me that polyamory is kind of sort of an answer to the question I always had, is that in monogamous relationships, one person can physically or emotionally satisfy another one in every single way. It's just impossible, isn't it?
Well, it is impossible. And so what happens in monogamous relationships is that certainly some of the emotional needs are met by friends, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so the difference for us is that we also have, some of our friends have sex with us, right? Excuse me, but
Great
we also,
setup.
but we also have friends, like I also have friends that meet some of my emotional needs and people that I don't have sexual relationships with. So various levels of intimacy, emotional intimacy only with some people. But yes, I mean, in monogamous relationships, those things are outsourced to friends. But your physical needs, that's it. You've committed to only getting your physical needs met by this person. So the way that people deal with physical needs that don't match up or desires that the other person has is in fantasy and with masturbation. That's how they deal with that. Or they have affairs. Or they have affairs, which is inappropriate. It's unethical. But if they're being ethical and they're choosing monogamy, then the way they deal with that is like their masturbation fantasies are stuff that they don't do with their partner. That's it.
Interesting.
So, for example, a bisexual woman or a bisexual man who chooses to be in a heterosexual marriage and says that they want that to be monogamous, their attractions to their same-sex partner become fantasy material because they're not engaging in that anymore.
You know what I found interesting is that a lot of people don't find cheating in a relationship if it's done with the same-sex person. So
if it's not consensual and above board and out front, it's cheating. Cheating is when you're hiding. Cheating is when you're lying. Cheating is when you're keeping something from your partner, and cheating is when you're breaking your agreements with your partner. So if you and I make an agreement to be monogamous, that means we make an agreement not to have sex with anyone else. What you're talking about can also be that somebody might not define that as sex. Like Bill Clinton, President Bill Clinton, who did, right? a blowjob isn't sex, right? You have no idea how many people have used that to get away with oral sex since.
Technically speaking.
Sorry, guys, that's sex, but...
Yeah. But I love that because we just recently had a conversation with my girlfriend about, like, what is cheating for you? And I'm like, I don't fucking know. You know, it's like, you can't measure the emotional aspect, because if I don't satisfy you emotionally in some way, you're going to go and find it elsewhere.
Cheating is not about the act. It's about the dishonesty. It's about the breaking of your agreements. Exactly. That's what cheating is, right? Because most people, although they'll go, oh, you fucked this other person, what's really upsetting them? It's not the actual sex. It's, you lied to me. You broke our agreement about being only with each other. You hid this part of your life from me. That's what they're upset about, not the actual physical bit. That's an add-on.
Exactly right.
It's the lying that kills people, and regaining trust. So that means that you can cheat in a polyamorous relationship.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense, because it's.
I had a marriage end because of that.
Polyamorous marriage?
Yeah, a polyamorous marriage ended because of that, because he had an affair for 6 months. And people were like, what? You can't have an affair. Yeah, he did. He had an affair. He slept. I had veto power. He knew I would have said no to this person for a variety of reasons, and good reasons. He didn't want to hear no, so he had a relationship with this person for 6 months, in secret, without me knowing. Mm-hmm. Lied. Everybody knew about it but me.
Oh, that's disgusting.
Right? That's how the marriage ended. Interesting. The fact that we were polyamorous, it doesn't even matter, right? It wasn't like, because somebody said, well, but didn't he have permission to sleep with other people? Yeah, not to lie about it, not to hide it, not to have a whole bunch of people talking about me behind my back, and right? All of that kind of stuff, that's all affair. So it's no different in a polyamorous situation than it is in a monogamous situation, because it's the same set of problems. You're breaking your agreements, you're lying.
You just literally solved a world's problem for me, actually, in that sense, because I struggled with that definition of cheating for so long now, because I understand how do you define it, because you can't just, and it makes so much sense.
And so when people talk about somebody having an emotional affair, right, what they're usually meaning is that you're no longer sharing emotional intimacy with me, and we have an agreement that we're each other's first place for emotional intimacy. Mm-hmm. And if you stop sharing it with me and you take it over here to someone else, that could feel like cheating, because you're not doing it with me anymore. Exactly. If you're also doing it with me and over there, then it probably isn't, mm-hmm. right? But it depends on what our agreements are.
Very true. Right? So it's all about the boundaries that you set, actually.
Absolutely. And each relationship should have its own boundaries. And one of the things that often heteronormative relationships have as a problematic set of things is that heteronormative folk rarely sit down and discuss the boundaries of their relationships.
Very true.
Right? Mm-hmm. I always describe this, people are going to get sick of hearing me say this, but I see them as off-the-shelf relationships. Like you go and you pick up off the shelf, here's the box, relationship, chocolate flavored. And you put it on the table. That box comes with a set of expectations, a set of activities, a set of beliefs, a timeline, a set of behaviors, and it's all prepackaged. Mm-hmm. And so, because you have those standard sets of desires, you can just take it off the shelf and run with it. So nobody inspects it. Mm-hmm. Whereas, if your desires are different, if your needs are different than that heteronormative space, you can't take it off the shelf. It won't fit, right? It's like, it's the wrong size. So you have to actually go, okay, I'm going to have to try it on. I'm going to have to think about the expectations and think about the assumptions and discuss. And so you're more likely to have a better relationship if you've actually done that, if you've mm-hmm. actually examined your assumptions going in. Because when people don't, like, for example, heterosexual people have sex much more quickly and without conversations. with the exception of anonymous sex. Like, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like in a relationship. I can't, what's common for people to do? They meet at a bar. They meet at a party. They go home the first night. They fuck. Have they had a conversation about sex? Maybe they've had a conversation about, we're going to use a condom. Right? Maybe. Yeah, hopefully, yes, but maybe. Have they sat down and talked about what is important to them in terms of even what turns them on? Not even the kind of emotional stuff, just what turns them on? No. But if you're kinky, we can't have sex until we talk about what turns each other on, because we might be into totally different things. So nothing's going to work. Mm-hmm. So we have to actually talk about it before we have sex. And guess what? If you talk about what you like and you don't like, and what you expect and you don't expect before you have sex, you have better sex. And if you talk about what you expect in a relationship, what you want in a relationship, what you don't want in a relationship, you have better relationships instead of making assumptions. So I spend a lot of time teaching people just to go back to basics. Hello. Pretend we're in the days in which, you weren't going to have sex until marriage or close to marriage, and you were going to date with a chaperone for a while, where you had to talk about everything. Although you still didn't talk about sex, but you talked about your likes and your dislikes, and you talked about your hopes and your dreams, and you talked about your families and how your families did things, so you all saw already where there were differences. Instead of experiencing it, you're able to talk about it beforehand. Does that make sense to you?
It makes perfect sense, yeah. I don't know why is it that we don't talk about relationships, because I look back, and one of the things that's very different to my relationships now with Anna is that we talk about everything kind of as it is, what we like, what we don't like, exactly as you describe it, and it makes it much easier, much better relationships as well, because we're comfortable with each other, because we that we can, we talk about things.
Well, because why don't we talk about them? Because we haven't been socialized to do so. We haven't been socialized to do so for a long time. We've got this weird Disney happily ever after. In Disney films, does anybody talk about?
No, they don't.
No, Prince Charming finds you because your shoe fits, right? He dances with you, and off you go. Where's the conversation? There is none. There's a magic, and then we get these really horrible beliefs, and I say horrible because they're quite destructive. If he really loves you, everything will be right. It will feel right, and you'll fly off and you'll live happily ever after. If it's right, you don't have to talk about it. Do you know how many couples have said that to me? I don't want to talk about sex and orgasm, because if our relationship was really the right one, we wouldn't have to talk about it. It would just work. Really? Boy, you must have some magic powers there, because I don't know anybody who mind reads, but people believe this, and they're disappointed. One of the best and worst examples of this. Okay, Valentine's Day is coming tomorrow, right? Right. What should you get someone for Valentine's Day? So, a lot of times, you get these dual messages. I remember this woman saying she was really upset because her husband had never bought her roses. Mm-hmm. Okay? She loves roses, and while he bought her flowers, he never bought her roses. Like, it was always some other flower. It was never roses. And to her, roses were important for Valentine's Day. Mm-hmm. That's what she wanted. Mm-hmm. She wanted a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen, however many roses, because to her that signified romantic love. Mm-hmm. And daisies just didn't cut it. Fine. Is it rational? No, but who cares? It's a preference.
Yeah.
But she'd never said, what I want is roses. Why? Because if she had to tell him, then it didn't count.
Interesting.
I can't tell you how many times I've heard a woman say that. Well, if I have to tell him to do what I want him to do, well, then he didn't think of it, so it doesn't have the same meaning. So I'm like, well, does that mean he has to read your mind? He should know. From where? From where should he know? How should he know that the tulips are good, but daisies are bad? That sunflowers are only okay for something? And how should he know that you want jewelry and that giving you a Hoover's a problem? Right? Look, people are like, well, that should be obvious. Well, not necessarily, because like sometimes the thinking is, I'm giving her something that's going to make her life easier. And so a guy or a gal might think, you know what? That's a really good gift if I give you something to make your life easier. Whereas somebody else might think that a really good gift is something frivolous that you wouldn't buy for yourself. That doesn't have a utilitarian thing. So those are two really different ideas of what a good gift is. Well, you can avoid having a problem by actually having a conversation. Just like when they talk about love languages, the whole thing about love languages was was about how is it that you enjoy, what expression of love is most important to you, right? Mm-hmm. So, are you somebody who gifts are really important to you? Are you somebody where words are really important to you? Are you somebody where acts of service are really important to you? So you really give a shit about gifts or words, but what makes you feel like you're really loved is your partner cleans the house or takes the car to get fixed, or, right? So acts of service, or is physical touch really important to you? So it's figuring out which are the most important ways that that you feel loved and how you express love, and finding out for your partner, because what most people do is they do for their partners what they would want done for them. Yes. Right? So if you're somebody who doesn't give a shit about presents, but it's really important to you to have quality time, meaning like clear a day or 2 days or go somewhere with a partner, then you'll surprise your partner with a weekend away. Mm-hmm. Your partner was hoping for a diamond ring. Yeah, but that's because you're doing what you think, and your partner buys you a watch that you don't want, or a pair of cufflinks, right? Because you don't give a shit about the tangible presents. Mm-hmm. What's important to you is the quality time. So it's you find these things out by having conversations. I mean, yes, there's self-help books that you can use and all sorts of things. I work with people. I give them a variety of workbooks or playbooks, as I call them, of exercises to do at various points in what we're doing. We do things in the sessions, and I do a whole set of things with people who are wanting to define their relationship, wanting to. Sometimes they're just starting out, but sometimes they've been in a rocky place, and they're doing better, and they want to know, how do we get on a good and even keel? Lots of couples come to me when they're thinking of opening up their relationship. Mm-hmm. So there's a whole bunch of stuff we do around that, about opening up your relationship in a way that doesn't tank it. Mm-hmm. So like if you're thinking about opening up your relationship and becoming non-monogamous, you don't decide to talk about opening up your relationship after you've already gone and cheated. Okay? A lot of couples do that. I'm not saying you can't survive that, but you're starting from a much harder place when you do that, because now you've got trust issues. Oh, yeah. Whereas before you might have only had a bit of insecurity. Mm-hmm. Now you've got huge insecurity and trust issues. It's harder. Mm-hmm. But, sometimes couples actually come and do it before opening it up. Mm-hmm. And so we deal with things like, well, what actually do you mean by opening up? Why do you want to do this? What are you looking for? And then looking at the things that might be real landmines. So most, people always ask about jealousy. Mm-hmm. And actually, I think a lot of the time it's envy. And there's a difference. Most of the time when people feel jealous, it's because they're feeling insecure in themselves and or insecure in the relationship. That's what jealousy is about, right? Most of the time. If they're able to become secure in themselves, and if they can get the relationship to a place where they feel really secure, they often don't feel that. But then what they feel at various times is envy. So envy is usually around things like, well, he has a date tonight and I don't, so I'm stuck at home being bored. Or I'm working and you get to go out and play. So I'm not angry about the other person. I'm angry that I'm not getting to have fun. Or you do something new with someone else that I wanted to do.
Ooh, that's a difficult one.
But all of these things are actually relatively easy to resolve, right?
Really?
Well, yeah. I mean, you can head them off at the pass by not doing that, right? You can discuss that you want to do this new thing with somebody else so that you get from me, but we talked about doing that together and actually that doesn't feel very good to me and we can negotiate that as opposed to going and doing it and then, if I'm envious because you're able to go off and do some things and I have to work, that's my shit. I deal with that. So most of, right? I mean, that's grown up. Most of the issues around envy, a lot of the times, are about time and energy and resources. Right?
Goddamn free things.
That's right. Those are the things, which is very different than me comparing myself to someone else and thinking, you want somebody more than you want me, or you love them more, or they're going to take you away. That's the jealousy stuff, and that's the icky stuff, and that's usually stuff that has to do with my own security and also security in the relationship. Like, I might be pretty secure in myself, but we've had a rocky relationship, and so I'm not secure in the relationship. Like maybe you had an affair. That I'm not secure in the relationship, even though I feel comfortable that I'm valuable and that I'm desirable. I'm not sure that you're going to be honest, right? That's
makes sense,
right.
Yeah.
So, it's if you know about these things, it's easier to work with them rather than barreling along. But
I just can't understand why are we living in such a very inappropriate way, because the things that you talk about, they explain things in very common sense, things that you understand.
Yeah, that's one of the, because although things are complex, they're not complicated. Right?
Yes.
A lot of this stuff, sometimes simple things are complex and difficult to learn. A lot of this stuff are basic skills. A lot of the times when I see people for loads of things, for many, many, many kinds of issues that they come to me with, the biggest problem that they have, I love Siri. The biggest problem that they have is a lack of skills. For example, some people don't learn how to soothe themselves when they are upset. They do not, we learn emotional skills in childhood. We primarily learn emotional skills in our family of origin. And so we learn self-soothing from very, very young, right? Baby's crying, mother comes. Baby's and meets the need. Baby's crying, mother comes and meets the need. Baby's crying, mother comes and meets the need. Baby's crying, mother's not there yet. But baby knows that every other time mother's come and met the need. So baby figures out a way, sucks a thumb, rocks, does something. They begin to figure out how to calm themselves enough because they know the need's is coming, right? The need's going to get met. So that's how you start to learn self-soothing. What happens if mother's unpredictable or father's unpredictable in meeting the need, or carer is unpredictable in meeting the need? You don't learn how to soothe yourself because you never know if you're if your need's gonna get met. So your attention's on that. If you don't learn how to soothe yourself, you look to others outside of you to calm you down. Can you see where that might be a problem in daily life when you have difficulties? If I need you or someone over here to calm me down if I'm upset, what if you're not around? What if there's nobody around?
Funny.
Mm-hmm. What if you're angry at me? What if I'm worried about the relate? Then I can be really worried I'm going to be abandoned, right? Because if you go, I have no way to deal with these horrible, terrible feelings. That's a really bad skill to be missing. So I give that as an example because it's a really very seemingly straightforward thing. Now, you can teach someone as an adult how to do that, but it's harder than learning it in the early stages of childhood. So many people are missing various skills. They're missing self-soothing skills. They're missing compartmentalization skills. So someone who can't compartmentalize at all, if they get angry and upset, everything has to be dealt with now. They can't splice it off for a while and attend to other things. Well, that causes havoc in an adult's life, right? That's the person who, like, you're trying to leave because you want to calm down because you're really, really angry and you know you need to just calm down, and that person blocks the door because they need it dealt with now because they can't sit with that level of emotion and they have no way of dealing with it. Shades of gray, ambivalence, right? Rarely is something black or white. However, in childhood and up really into adolescence, we don't really start learning how to sit with ambivalence until adolescence, and we don't really master it until young adulthood. In childhood, things are good or they're bad. We learn, right? Yes or no. They're in one box or the other. Now that helps us make sense of the world. It helps us categorize, right? But that's not how the world really is. Like, you could be a nice person and do a shitty thing. That doesn't make you bad, right? That means something you did is bad, or part of you is not optimum. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. But if you haven't learned how to sit with ambivalence, with the understanding that people have different layers to themselves, that some things are both good and bad, black and white, hard and easy, right? Right? All these opposites, that some things actually sit in the middle and they vary and they can be uncomfortable, and you have to be able to sit and be uncomfortable. Love somebody who actually, you think that their behavior recently has been appalling, but you still love them and you sit with that so that you can process it and work with it so that you can rehabilitate whatever relationship you have. If you can't do that, makes for really difficult relationships, right? You did something wrong, I need you to go because you're an asshole and you're this and you're that and you're the other. Right? You did all these right things, you are Mr. Perfect Wonderful until you do something wrong. And now you're an asshole, right? Yeah. So it makes for things very difficult. Not having the skill to sit with ambivalence, to understand the complexities of things is, on an emotional level, is really difficult. That's a difficult skill. That's one that we don't learn till later. So lots of people are missing that skill. Some people don't have empathy. That's an emotional skill. You learn empathy. You're not born with empathy. You learn empathy. Young.
What do you mean by empathy?
Empathy is the ability to place yourself in somebody else's shoes and feel how they might be feeling. Sympathy is the ability to relate to what somebody else is saying, but you're not able to kind of put yourself in their shoes. Empathy is a really important emotional skill for relationships. Now, that doesn't mean you fully understand, and we're just like, this isn't I can put myself in your shoes fully, and now I truly understand you. No, that's not how life works. But I have to be able to relate to that level. Because if I can put myself in your shoes and feel how you might feel in a given situation, that changes my behavior, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like, for example, if I can put myself in your shoes and feel how you might feel if I'm shouting at you and calling you every fucking horrible name in the book, and think about how that might feel to have somebody doing that to me, that might stop me from doing that. If I can't imagine how that might feel, and all I can feel is my anger in the moment, I'm going to act very differently.
How do you teach that? Like,
So you learn that growing up by watching people and understanding their feelings, right? 3-year-old comes and hits you, and you cry, and you're shocked, right? But they get it. They start to get it slowly, because you'll say something about it too. I'm crying because that hurt and it upset me. You hit me, it upset me. This is how it feels to be hit. So that's those sorts of things. So it's an observation, and it's the comments that people make, and it's observation of somebody having empathy as well, right? Behaving in that way. So that's how you learn it growing up. It's easy to learn it when you're being surrounded by different examples. It's much harder to learn it as an adult, because you're having to unlearn your way of being in the world as well. So you can. Sometimes people have trouble learning it, and they can approximate empathy. And that means that they don't feel what it feels like to be in someone else's shoes. Because the part that's important about this is it's not an intellectual exercise. I place myself in your shoes, and I feel how it might feel to be in your position, not think about how it might feel to be in your position. You see the difference?
Yeah, I do.
So that's something you learn as a child growing up, right? You see a kid whose mother starts to cry, the child starts to cry. Or a child who hits another child, and that child starts to cry, and then they start to cry, right? And that's a demonstration of the beginnings of empathy there. So if you don't have that, sometimes an approximation is you can learn how to think about it, but you still won't feel it. If you don't feel it, it is really harder to take other people into account on a very deep emotional level. If I can't predict how it might feel to be beaten up, I'm more likely, on an emotional level, I'm more likely to beat somebody up, right? Because I don't know.
How do you understand if you understand it on an emotional level or on kind of the level before that, which is kind of intellectual level? How do you distinguish the two?
Well, an intellectual level is when somebody says they can't feel it. And they will tell you that. Like, it's like, if let's say I'm thinking about a teenager that I worked with, a 16-year-old, and she used to threaten to cut people, and she used to spit at people. And when she got angry, I mean, she exploded. And she had no empathy. Like, she had no empathy. So she could terrify a 10-year-old because she was angry, and with a knife, and screaming and shouting. And the fact that she could see that the kid was frightened, it didn't sink in. She couldn't feel what that was like. Like, if you're terrifying somebody, if you notice that when you're shouting, somebody's looking terrified, you kind of step back.
Yeah.
I mean, a good example of that is, so I come from a family where people shout and scream and argue, but with no violence, right? It's just like arguments get loud, particular cultural background.
Been there.
But one of my marriages was to a man where nobody ever expressed anger in his family at all. And anger was completely passive aggressive. So, nobody ever expressed anger until all of a sudden somebody would, and then it was all underground again. So he perceived when I raised my voice a tiny bit, like not the shouting and screaming, as shouting. And I remember one day he said, "Why are you shouting at me?" And I'm like, "I'm not even really raising my voice. What the fuck are you talking about?" Because for him, that was huge. So I had to be able to step back and kind of look at, he was frightened of me because in his world, nobody ever did that. So that must mean that somebody's going to become violent. I'm like, on what planet do you think I would become violent, right? There's no evidence that I've ever been violent. Why would you think that? But that's how it landed for him. And so I had to kind of step back and sort of figure out a different way to express how I was feeling, because I could feel how frightened he was. But I felt that, right? I wasn't analyzing how frightened he was. I could feel it because I looked at him and I observed, and you see a person's emotions, you feel the energy from them. Well, a person who doesn't have empathy can't do that.
But, for example, when you said about that 14-year-old who scares like a 10-year-old, and he's terrified, is she not stopping because
she's not seeing that the 10-year-old's terrified?
Or how do you distinguish that? And if she sees it and she likes it, so she pushes it further?
Well, she sees it and she likes it. It's not. Yes, she doesn't have empathy, and also she's being sadistic, right? So those are two different things, right? They're two things together. But because none of this, you never only have one thing going on. But in this example, she didn't clock fear, right? She could see, and I remember taking her through this. So what was the look on her face? Because I stopped her in the middle of doing this to somebody. So what was the look on her face? What was she feeling? I don't know. That was the first response, right? I don't know. Well, come on, you do know. What was she feeling? Maybe she was frightened. Okay. What tells you she's frightened? I don't know. Okay, let's step back and think about it. What did you see? Well, she was shaking. Okay. So she was able to, when she stopped and slowed down, pick out physical things that told her that that person was having a feeling, but she couldn't feel the energy coming off the person. Right? She couldn't feel it. She couldn't imagine what a person might feel.
Such an interesting
she couldn't switch that and imagine what it might feel to be that way and then cue into the feelings of the other person in front of her. She could only do the observational things. So what I did was I taught her to do the observational things and then and cognitively analyze them to change her behavior. So she still didn't feel like if I frightened you, when I notice you're frightened, I feel bad. I don't want to frighten you, right? So I'm like, oh, shit, I'm sorry, step back, change my behavior. She couldn't do that, but she could see that you were frightened and then process, okay, I think I've frightened him. I don't want to do that because it doesn't get me what I want. Right. It allows me to express what I want to express. Yes, that's what I want to do. But it doesn't get me what I want, so I don't want to do that. So what do I need to do differently? But that's all on an intellectual level. None of it's being felt. Okay. And that's what I mean. So some people they're just not able to learn it on an emotional level by the time they're grown. And so it's hard. But you can still teach them a workaround. So these are all skills, all emotional skills, and communication skills sometimes people don't learn. Like we just said, passive aggressive in terms of anger. Sometimes people don't learn how to feel the anger and express it. True passive aggression, they don't even feel the anger. They push it down before they feel it. And then it comes out somewhere else. That's how you get the really crazy making thing of somebody like being furious, not knowing that they're furious, but everybody else can see by their weird behavior that they are. Because they're not acting angry, but they're doing weird shit. Like ruining somebody's stuff accidentally. I'm not angry. And they truly believe it's accidentally. They believe that, right? Fascinating. So it's a fascinating defense. But so if you don't have and sometimes people don't have communication skills, like they don't know how to be present in a room with someone. They don't know how to listen. All of these things are things that can be taught. And I guess the reason that I find it so important to mention this is that a lot of times people don't understand why come for coaching or why come for therapy. Oh, like talking about things doesn't help and this doesn't help. Okay, I can have that argument with you. That aside, talking about things does help, but that aside, that's not all you do in this. Part of what you do is learn some skills so you can get rid of the skills deficit, and that improves your life as well. Never even thought about that. Nobody teaches couples skills in the world. Like you learn how to relate to each other based on what you observed at home. That's how you learn how to be in a relationship. You don't even necessarily learn how to notice your own patterns. So when a couple comes into me, most of the time I'm starting from scratch. It's like, okay, so you learn to relate to each other in this way and it's not working. So let's go back to basics. There's skills we can learn. So I do that. I mean, sometimes I do that in sessions, but I do that in workshops. I do that in, I'm starting a membership group at the moment, in part to make it easier for people to have access. And so that's one of the things that's going to be in the group. There's going to be lots of different skills, examples, and there'll be resources that, if you pay to be a member, then there'll be resources that you get every month. And some of those resources will be around learning skills and improving your emotional skills and improving your communication skills and different ways of practicing and observational exercises so that people start really upping their game, because the better those skills are, the better your relationships are. The better you're able to communicate, the better your emotional skills are, the better your sex is. The physical skill is the least important part of sex. And usually very easy to change, right? But that's the least important part of sex. It's the connection that's the most fun. Even casual sex, right? Even casual sex, if you can't communicate, orgasm is by no means guaranteed.
That's all in the next book.
I mean, it's amazing to me. Okay, you're a guy and you didn't know about the clitoris. Okay, fair enough. You're a guy. Nobody's taught you that. Your sex education was probably crap.
Non-existent, I would say.
Or non-existent. So, okay, nobody's taught you that. Do you know how many women don't know that? Do you know that I recently taught a 66-year-old woman that information?
Oh, that's sad.
Well, no, it's happy because now she knows.
Oh, that's true, but hey, 66 years of your life.
66 years of your life, didn't know that. It's her own anatomy. Why? Because we don't talk about these things. We don't give decent sex education. Our sex education, we focus on anatomy about preventing pregnancy and disease. That's all anybody cares about.
Oh, true, yeah.
Procreation and prevention of procreation and disease. We don't talk about pleasure. We don't give good anatomy. We don't teach relationships. So now, in some schools, they teach consent a little bit. But
I would be very...
But it's not embedded in an understanding. We don't teach that there's a wide range of sexual behavior. And that, guess what, guys? Most of it is normal. Normal is a mathematical term. It's about average.
I'm a science of education. That's right for me. It's like there's a normal means.
And it's important to understand that, because right now, in Western countries, it's normal at some time in your life to be clinically depressed. Now, is that something you would strive for? No. So normal isn't necessarily good.
Yeah.
It's a mathematical term.
So what happens on average within
That's right.
Life. Yeah. Interesting. I have a question. It's to do with my girlfriend, partner. It's very she smiles all the time, even when we had like a terrible situation where I fucked up badly, trust issues, and when she was, you could see that she's just devastated, still with a massive smile on her face. Another time we got stopped by a policeman because she was driving 70 miles an hour in a 40 mile an hour zone, and police car came right behind her, stops us right in the middle of the road. The guy looks in the car, is like, "What are you doing?" And she just looks back and just a massive smile on her, is like,
anxiety? Is that her anxiety response? Some people smile when they're nervous.
She never doesn't smile. Never. Not a single time have I seen her not smiling.
I mean, then I don't know. I mean, it could be a mask. I mean, there's a whole host of reasons why people will do that. But when people smile when it's inappropriate smiling and laughing is usually an anxiety response. Inappropriate laughing sometimes is a release of emotion. It's just the emotion that comes out is inappropriate, right? Mm-hmm. Like sometimes if something's really emotionally intense, somebody will suddenly burst into laughter, and that's because it's like they need a release. And so equally they could have cried, but they don't suddenly cry. They just suddenly laugh. Particularly if they're not somebody who's not comfortable with crying, sometimes that will happen.
Is there ways to deal with that?
Well, first you have to recognize that your behavior and expression isn't matching the actual mood, and then we figure out what is it,
Okay.
what's going on, and then you work to change that. You work to express what's actually going on.
I told you, it's like, we need to go to a doctor with this.
You know, I mean,
we need to sort it out.
It's something to work on to figure out, okay, well, what's actually happening when this happens? Mm-hmm. A lot of times people aren't even aware of it. So first it's become aware of it, and then it's, well, what's happening? Okay, let's look at what's happening. Mm-hmm. And then there's stuff we can do to gain the expression of what's actually underneath. Because that's obviously what you want. You want the real emotion instead of the veneer.
Good. Okay. We shall be working on that. Because I've told her several times, she just doesn't realize exactly what you said.
Yeah, she probably is completely unaware of it, which is why I say it's definitely likely to be a nervous response. It's like that programmed response. Deer in headlights. And for her, that looks like...
that policeman exactly was that.
You know.
All right, fair enough. Back to polygamy. Mm-hmm. How did you get to that point where you've been, I would say, evolved enough to recognize that is the path to go down to?
I mean, like I said, this is another one of always for me. I've always, when I've really been into somebody, I wanted to sleep with them. So I recognized that if I felt that way, that sleeping with only one was problematic. But of course, I was socialized into monogamy just like most people in the West. And so I tried really hard to, find the one and only and get the one and only and do that. And I was 17 and, in my first, with my first love, who I am still with, we were in a relationship, then we were friends, now we're in a relationship again. So, that's great. It's wonderful. And so we go from friends to relationship to friends to relationship. We're always going to be in each other's lives. But, when we met, I didn't know he had a girlfriend. He was living with somebody. And I found out he was living with somebody, and I was really upset because we were involved and, blah, blah, blah. She was upset. And then, so we broke up, and then we came back to school the following year, and we started seeing each other again, only she now knew. I'm not sure if she really knew that we were still fucking, but she knew because we had an interest in spirituality that we shared, and she didn't want to talk about this shit, so she kind of like, oh good, go talk to her about that. And so that was, so that was really my first polycule. I didn't have any words for it, but that became my first poly family. Okay. And the way it worked was I was involved with him, and she was always more comfortable if I had another guy. So I dated a series of guys who I brought into this group. I was really quite happy to just be involved with the two of them. She wasn't really involved with her sexually. I had a couple of experiences with her, but she wasn't really into it. But I had a deep emotional relationship with her. So, this was my family, right? These were my people. Mm-hmm. And that felt really right to me. And then we had some extended family.
Can I just clarify something? So you met this guy who had a girlfriend. Mm. You had sex with him.
No, I had sex with him.
Yeah. And then you realized that he had a girlfriend.
Right.
And then you all had a conversation.
No, we broke up.
Okay.
And then after the summer, we got back together.
With a guy.
I got back together with him, and he told me that she was aware, and she was. I just didn't talk with her.
Okay, so she knew
that she knew that, but I don't know that she knew we were fucking, but she certainly knew we were spending time together.
Okay.
And then one night, about 2 a.m, she called me, and she's like, where is he? And I'm like, I fucking don't know. He was supposed to be here at 10 o'clock, and he never showed up. And we both went, oh yeah, the blonde. Right. And
what a brilliant thing to bond over.
And yeah, so she said, "You want to have coffee next week?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." We'd never really talked, and so we went out for coffee. And she showed up with this little bandage over here, and I'm like, "What the fuck happened?" And they're in their bedroom. They had a loft bed, with a desk and stuff underneath. Mm-hmm. And she'd thrown a punch at him because she was really angry. And she ended up hitting her nose on the bed. because he stepped out of the way. And so, we became friends. And I would come over to the house and, we'd all cook together. We played Dungeons and Dragons together with some other people. But, she knew that he and I had a sexual relationship. So that was a polycule. And we did end up in a sexual situation together and stuff, but it wasn't her thing. So, so we had an emotional relationship. And so that was how it was for a while. And that worked for me. And we had some extended people that also we occasionally had, everybody was having sex with everybody else. So that felt really comfortable. And when that part of things ended for a variety of reasons and we were in different places, I did try some monogamous stuff again. But it never really felt comfortable enough. There's one situation where if I had married this one particular person, I may have stayed monogamous. I don't know. But I think we probably would have not been monogamous with each other. I think once the relationship was solidified, we probably would have invited other people in because both of us are polyamorous now. So, but it just was never 100% comfortable for me. And not the least of which because if I was with a man, I also wanted to be with a woman. If I was with a woman, I also wanted to be with a man. And so it was problematic, right, to be monogamous because I was saying, well, I'm just going to give up all this other stuff over here because, and I never understood it. It was like, I understood it from a societal point of view. So I bought the line for a while, but I never really felt it. It never made sense. And so once I realized that I wasn't going to lose anything, once I was okay and felt secure enough in me not to feel like if so-and-so slept with someone else, that person was going to supplant me and I was going to lose my place because they were all better than me. Once I didn't feel that way anymore, then it was a kind of non-issue. But I had my first marriage was monogamous.
When did you get to a point where, probably not, when obviously you're married to a gentleman at the moment.
Yes.
And
we've known each other for 11 years now. We've been together for since September 2009, and we got married in 2014.
With regards to then, you said you are in a relationship with other people.
So I'm married to him. I have a relationship with a couple that he knows very well because they're extended family, but I'm in a relationship with them. They're in Atlanta. I have a relationship with this guy that I've known since I was 17. And my husband and him met and they got along famously. So, and he lives with a woman and we all get along. All four of us get along. But I have a relationship with him.
Yeah.
And he's in north of San Francisco. And then I'm sort of kind of dating two people here.
What distinguishes your relationship with your husband to the others that you have? So is there
each relationship is different.
But clearly the one with your husband is more important.
Well, okay, so no, all right. So this is an interesting area. So it is now not popular to use terms like primary or secondary relationships, and people get quite upset about that idea, and say all my relationships are equal. Well, so I'm going to say this that I think that it's quite hard to have all your relationships equal when you live with someone, because when you live with somebody, you have certain responsibilities towards that person. So the idea that you would not prioritize them in a crisis situation, I think, is probably not very real, right? I think a lot of times people end up prioritizing the person because they live with them, right? This is the person that's paying half my bills or paying my bills. This is the person that's taking care of me when I'm ill. This is the person I have children with. Yeah. So that, But in our situation, I prioritize him not because he's my husband, but because we're in a hierarchical relationship, right? Because he's dominant. He's the master. So that's the priority relationship because it's a hierarchy already.
Can't you get another master?
Well, yeah, but it's still, that's the first hierarchy. I mean, in fact, the other, the couple that I'm involved with are both dominant. But he is giving permission for me to be with them. He's on the top.
And there's basically no way that he can be replace.
Well, somebody could do it differently, but that's not how it will work with us.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm not the one with the agency because I handed him the authority. I'm not handing him part of the authority and them part of the authority, right? No, I'm handing him the authority. He cedes authority to them for when I'm with them.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, he's got the authority. If the three of them are together, I look to him first. But that's because we're in a hierarchical relationship.
Mm-hmm.
If we weren't, if there was no authority transfer dynamic, it might not be that way. It might be all equal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody might be, there might be a rotation for prioritizing, right? That's how some people do it. Or there might be a discussion about each relationship and when it's prioritized and when it's not.
It's a bit confusing. Well,
it can be complicated. It depends on, how many relationships you have, what kind of relationships you have. And that's why I said, Raven Caldera is an incredible author and a Leatherman, and polyamorous, and has written an awful lot. He's a polyamorous trans man, leather man, spiritual guy, and he's just amazing. If you've not seen his work, it's worth looking at his work. But he's written a lot about authority transfer-based relationships and, master-slave relationships, dominant-submissive relationships, and polyamory and the intersection. And, one of the things that he says is that in order to have a polyamorous relationship, you need to communicate a lot, right? There's lots of communicating, there's lots of processing. So if you have one relationship, there's a certain amount of communicating and processing to have a good relationship. If you have more than one, exponentially more. Mm-hmm. If you want to add a power exchange or an authority transfer relationship to that, exponentially more, right? So you have to have incredibly good communication skills in order to balance all these things. And it's true. You do. I mean, people who are in multiple relationships communicate a lot. If they don't, their multiple relationships go boom.
That makes sense. That's so difficult. I wonder.
It makes life interesting.
No doubt about that.
Don't have time to get bored.
Interesting. And for him then, could he find some? Are you the primary person, or could there be somebody else who's more important than you?
No, there won't. No, I'm his wife, and he has full responsibility for me because I'm a slave. So, there's nobody's going to come in and be prioritized above me ever.
Wow.
Because that's his commitment to me. I mean, because I'm holding two big positions that require him to take responsibility. Mm-hmm. So somebody could come in, I suppose. He could have somebody who came in where it was equal, right, to me. Somebody was equal to me, but not somebody going to come in and take my place. Why? What would be the point? Why would he do that? For what reason?
That's a good question.
Interesting. I mean, deciding to marry somebody, that's a big commitment. That comes with it rights, but it also comes with a huge number of responsibilities, right? Mm-hmm. And deciding to take ownership of somebody, also huge commitment, comes with rights, huge amount of responsibility. So if you've already committed to taking that level of responsibility for somebody, why would you go find somebody else and put them in above that person?
I cannot argue with that.
It wouldn't make sense to do that.
Yeah.
Unless you were in a relationship with another dominant person and you decided to add that. I mean, I suppose people could do that in a complicated way. I mean, I am in a relationship with two dominant people who are in relationship with each other, but that's how my relationship with them started. So, I can't see him doing that. It wouldn't make any sense. As he would say, I don't have the fucking energy or time to go through that. Because it would take a lot. And he doesn't want responsibility for somebody else. If he has another partner, it's because it'll be somebody that he enjoys spending time with, he enjoys playing with, but he doesn't want that level of responsibility for anyone else. Mm-hmm. That's a big, big, big level of responsibility. So, no, that won't happen. And I mean, he may have other partners down the road again, and there may be people that he gets involved with. We've certainly been in situations where we played together with people that we know. I could easily see a situation where he was playing with somebody and I was watching, or I was around people that we know, whatever. And he may get another partner, but that again would be somebody who would talk to me first, and I would want to know the person, and then he would negotiate with that person about their responsibilities, and I would have my say, but ultimately it would be his decision. So I guess if he wanted to put somebody in on, he could, but it has consequences, right? Yeah. Just because you have the authority doesn't mean you want to exercise it, right? Like given the amount that I give to this relationship and the amount of attention and effort and energy I put into him and taking care of him and all of that, if he were to just pick somebody up and put them in essentially above me, give them power over me or authority over me, I'd be pissed off. And so he'd have to deal with an angry person for a while and an upset person for a while. And so the cost benefit, right? It's like, why do that? He's satisfied with me, so why do that? Right? He's not dissatisfied with me. If he were dissatisfied with me, well, then maybe I could understand. But he's really happy with me, so why do that?
Makes sense.
To have another person, you don't have to put them in.
Yeah.
You don't have to change the hierarchy.
Place, yeah.
You could put them next to. That's different. That doesn't cause anger and upset and blah, 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 blah. Right?
Could he, in theory, put somebody during like a intimate thing, put somebody in charge of you that you didn't approve? Would that be more interesting to you then, because it's an exercise of power?
Not necessarily. I mean, the way that consent works for us is that he could certainly tell me, I want you to sleep with this person for whatever reason. And I could say, I don't like them. I'm not attracted to them. And he could say, you're going to do it anyway. And there would be a heat in that for me, right? It would be hot to me because that's a huge exercise of ownership, right? It really illustrates our relationship because ultimately I will do what he says. So it'd be really hot, even though, so then I wouldn't not like the person because the situation, right? Because it changes the situation, but but other people might not feel that way. This is the peculiarity of my turn on in our relationship, that he could do that and that would definitely be hot. But let's say he was doing that and he wanted me to see this person regularly. That could be very awkward, very difficult, and I might have to work on how I felt about it. I would still do it. It might be really hard for me, and I might have to say to him, look, the once was one thing, but, I still can't stand this person. And then he probably wouldn't keep pushing it because he wouldn't be getting anything out of it. You have to remember, somebody doesn't do something like that unless they're going to get something out of it. They don't, why? Right? They might be getting something out of it like an exchange. Like if you think about, I owe this guy one and he wants you. So, right? That might be what he's getting out of it.
Interesting.
Right? Or, although he's never done that, but I mean, that could be a situation.
Yeah.
Or, he's a voyeur. I like watching this. I'm getting out of it. Or the pleasure of knowing that I'm doing something that I absolutely don't want to do, but I'm doing it because he told me to. Now that's a lot of power and a lot of control, and that might be really hot. But if that was the pleasure, doing it 6 times, 7 times, 8 times wouldn't make any sense because he's not going to get any more pleasure out of it making me do it 10 times than once. And he's going to have me more upset. So, it's a cost-benefit analysis there.
Complex and interesting.
It is complex and interesting. And also can be boring and normal and usual and like everybody else. Like everybody else, we get sick. And, I get sick and he has to take care of me. He gets sick and I'm taking care of him differently. Like everybody else, we have times where life is tough for whatever reasons. We have bereavements. We have hard times at work. We have money difficulties at times. We have child issues. We have ex issues, like everybody else. So it's not some big fantasy. And sometimes people kind of get this weird thing in their heads, like it's some big fantasy party all the time, and you're in leather all the time, and you're having this wonderful crazy sex all the time, and that's what you're doing all the. I mean, we can go months and not have any sexual interaction with anybody, right? Because like ordinary couples, you go through different periods, so we could go, we could go months without me seeing any of my other partners because they're in the U.S. and before I started dating here, they're in the U.S. and the schedules didn't coincide. We can go periods of time where we're not having sex with each other because somebody's ill or somebody's got pressure or whatever, just like every other couple. So it's not all exciting and hot and all the time. There's a lot of that, and there's a lot of ordinary. What it is a lot of work. It's positive work, but it's work. So you don't choose to do something like this if you have the fantasy in your head that it's all going to be fun. And it's all always going to be hot. Because then you end up creating horrible drama for yourself and you don't get much out of it. You have to know going into it that the complexity and the extra work and time and energy and effort is worth it. Because you got to work. And this myth that you don't have to work at relationships is just a bunch of bullshit. All relationships need time and attention and work. So if you're going to have more than one at a time, guess what? More time, more attention, more work. Not complaining. I choose this life. And at any given point, I could choose not to have this life. Right? I could say...
Can you?
Yes. I mean, realistically, yes. There's always a get-out clause.
Okay, so you still have control in some sort of...
Well, I mean, there's
level.
always... Well, of course you do. Of course you do. I mean, otherwise, there would be... what's he going to do? Tell the police, well, she signed her name on this line, and she wanted to leave 3 years ago, but I've locked her in the basement, and it's acceptable because she's... Right? The reality of these situations is there's always some form of get-out clause. It's not an easy get-out clause, but there's a get-out clause. I mean, so I could choose not to live in this life. If our relationship broke down irretrievably, we could choose to break up, or we could be happy and lovely and whatever, and we could choose not to have any more polyamorous relationships. I mean, you can always simplify things or make things more complex. There are still options, but he's got the last word. That's the difference for us.
For most of the things.
For everything.
Except like if it's completely...
But even then, he's got the last word, but only an idiot would try to keep somebody who didn't want to be there.
Unless that person likes it.
No, you wouldn't like somebody who hates you, doesn't want you, right? If things have gotten to the point, unless you're a psychopath, and that's a different thing, because there was never consent to begin with in that sort of thing. If I got to the point where I said, I don't, can't even imagine this. I don't love you anymore. I don't want you anymore. This isn't working for me. He would require counseling, therapy, coaching. He would require us to do something. And if the outcome was that that's truly how I felt, he would be devastated, but he'd let me go because he wouldn't want me to be with him when I didn't unhappy and not wanting him, right? But he has nothing to worry about. I adore him,
Yeah, I can see it in your face.
I absolutely adore him. This is the first person I've ever been with that really completely supports me being me, that wants me to be fully me. No judgment.
So right.
It is the most amazing thing. I can't even describe how amazing it is to know that I've got somebody at my back that wants most of all for me to be the best me that I can be and will do anything to help me do that. Even if sometimes it means that he doesn't get as much of what he wants from me. I travel a lot, so even if it means that sometimes he doesn't get the kind of service he might want from me because I'm running around the fucking world. He gets off on me being me.
That's the best thing ever, then.
Yep. He absolutely, sometimes people are like, oh, you're dominant, and oh, you must be topping from the bottom, you're really in charge. No, he loves me being out in front and being shiny out in front, being powerful, because then he can sit back there and go, that's mine.
Literally.
Right. That's mine. And I can shut it down. And for him, that's tremendously hot. Amazing power to go, you see that really powerful woman? That's mine. He loves it. And that's great. And I adore it, and I adore him. And I love him.
Such a different twist, because when we started talking about it, and it's like my primitive understanding of it was like, okay, dominance, and it's like fair enough. And then this completely different twist where it's like, yes, it's this, but it's in the overall understanding of you and supporting you, and it's like completely.
Yep. There are many ways of being in charge and being in control. And people don't think it through. They get this kind of classical, he's going to choose my clothing for me, and he's going to, sometimes he does. I wear dresses a lot more often than I ever did when I met him. I wear dresses and skirts far more often than I wear anything that looks like trousers, or tunics with leggings. It's still far more often something like that than I wear trousers, because that's his preference. But he doesn't micromanage me. It would drive him nuts. He doesn't like doing that. So, it's just far more. It's far more subtle in some ways, because he's not micromanaging me. But some people are into micromanaging, and if that's what you're into, by all means, if you want to tell her what to do or him what to do, every little thing in their day, if you want to be in total control of everything they do and they want that, have a ball, right? There are totally as many different ways that you can think of there are as ways of doing relationships.
People.
Exactly right. And that's the gift. And don't judge other people who do it different. You shouldn't be. The only time judgments can be made is when someone's actually causing harm, when there's abuse going on. Other than that, you may do it totally differently. And I may look at your relationship and go, God, that wouldn't suit me. Wouldn't suit me. It suits you. Isn't that great?
Yeah.
How wonderful. And we shouldn't be so concerned about what people are doing in their bedrooms. Are they happy? Fantastic. Are they harming or dealing with people who can't give consent, or animals, or, things that can't give consent? They're not? Fabulous. It's none of my business what you do. Just be happy doing it.
I agree.
I don't know why we spend so much energy
in other
trying to
business,
control other people's business. And there's so many more important things in the world than to worry about how it is you like to fuck and how you like to love. It's not. Have at it. As long as it's consensual, go for it.
All right. I think it is.
It is time for me to get ready for this.
It is time.